Okay, we are going to do a spring edit in Camera Raw. And so I'm going to select the image that I want to use and open that in Camera Raw. Once I have this image in Camera Raw, I'm going to start with the Basics panel and I'm going to work my way over editing. My image looks slightly tilted, so I'm going to straighten up that horizon line by going to the crop tool. And I'm going to set the crop to 2:3, which is a typical, it's the same crop ratio as your camera takes pictures. So I'm going to draw this crop box inside, and if you hover just outside the corner, you can take and rotate that. And I'm going to rotate it like so and see how that looks. Now it looks a little bit, so I'm going to do that. Much better. Okay, I'm going to very quickly spot heal this car back here. You can watch the spot heal, spot removal video for a little bit more info, but I'm just going to do this really quick. Let's see if this looks, I think it will look fine here in a minute. Now it doesn't look absolutely perfect, but I'm also zoomed in crazy close, so once I zoom out, I think it will look just fine. All right, I'm going to zoom out, going here, and fitting into view. Looks good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and okay, so I am going to click on this hand tool, and that will bring me back to these options here where I see all of my basic editing panel. I'm going to start this on the basic panel, and I'm going to warm up my image quite a bit there, and I am going to adjust any of the basic panel. It's kind of trial and error. Everybody will start to edit a little bit differently. All right, once I have the basic panel done, I'm going to move over into the tone curve panel, and I'm going to create a slight S, brightening up my highlights and dropping my shadows just a tiny bit. That looks pretty good. In the detail area, I'm going to sharpen my image just a tiny bit, and I'm going to mask it up to about 50. And then I am going to, I can add a little bit of luminance into the noise reduction. I don't really go over 28, so stay right about at 20. Then I'm going to move into my HSL adjustments, and I always start in hue and work my way over into saturation and then luminance. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at specifically this flowering tree, and I am going to adjust this magenta. I believe that's where that color is. And I think I'm going to warm it up into the red instead of the purple. And so yeah, that tree is definitely magenta. The best way to figure out where you want your colors is to take that particular slider and adjust it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this down to kind of like the warmer red or the cooler red, and I'm going to warm up my magenta. I kind of like that. All right, now I'm going to take a look at my green, and I'm going to make those greens cooler as well. Those greens will really pop. If I were doing a fall photo, I'd most likely pull my greens this way and warm them, but for the spring, I typically make them a little bit cooler. It's not much aqua in there. And my yellows, let's take a look. I am going to warm up my yellows as well. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and move into the saturation panel, and this is where I'm going to really enhance the look of this tree. So I'm going to take and I'm going to start with my magenta, and notice how that tree is going to become much more vibrant by adding more saturation into that magenta. I'm going to take a look at the purple. Up that just a tiny bit. It's not doing too much. And when I added some coolness to the grass, it kind of got really bright, almost neon looking. So in my saturation panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the saturation of my grass down. So it's still really green, but it's not like super neon green. There we go. And there's not much orange in there. And I'm going to also take and I am going to add some saturation into that red there in that tree. And now that tree is really starting to pop compared to what we started with. I'm going to go into the luminance panel, and typically what I do is I drop the luminance. It kind of depends on what I'm doing, but if you brighten the luminance, it tends to, you lose details in the lightest areas. So I kind of like those darker, deeper colors. So I tend to drop those. All right. Be careful when you do that. If you look at this area right here, as I'm dropping the blue luminance, it picks up my sky is, it was overcast day, so it looks overexposed, even though the main part of my picture is not. If I drop my blue luminance, it starts to add blue in here, but it looks very fake, so I'm going to bring that back up. You want to maintain the original integrity of the photograph. All right, I'm going to move over into split toning. Split toning is a lot of fun. You have to be somewhat careful because it adds color and tones very quickly. And again, you want to maintain the original integrity of the photograph, just enhance the colors of that season. So what I'm going to do, we've got in split toning, we have our highlights and our shadows, and you're adding a tone to either the highlights or shadows in the image. In order to be able to see the change in either one of these, you have to actually add saturation. I typically start at about 15, even though that may be too much. And you can start to see, like, especially the white areas, we want our whites white. So this is probably too much, but as I take this hue saturation slider, you can then see how it changes. That's kind of a greeny tone to a yellow, red. And I kind of like that right there. It adds just a little bit of warmth, and I'm going to drop that. There we go. Okay, now that I have the highlights where I want it, I'm going to go down into, actually drop this down a tiny bit more. Okay, now I'm going to go down into the shadows. I'm going to up it to a 15, good place to start. And then, and I typically don't choose the same color for both of these. And so I'm going to change this around and see, kind of like that blue there. It's a bit too much, so I'm going to settle it right here at this blue. You can get some really cool effects, but I want this image to stay pretty warm, so I'm not going to add that much blue. A lot of times I will do complementary colors. Oh, that looks terrible. Okay, so I'm going to stay with this blue here. Right there. The other thing you can do once you add your split toning is mess around with the balance. If you go to the right, it will add more of your highlights than your shadows, versus this way it will pull more of your shadows, be stronger shadows and less highlights. So I kind of like exactly where I had it. I'm going to drop that a tiny bit more. And there you have it, a spring edit. If you want, you can add a sun flare. That video is on the fall and spring edit lesson page.